Hi there, welcome to the channel or welcome back. I'm Angela and today we're going to do a little bit of an experiment. If that sounds interesting, stick around. What I have here are 4 pretty roughly equal size samples of a wool acrylic cotton sweater knit that I am going to use to make my next project out of. It's the Marlowe sweater by True Bias. And I did not realize that this fabric had wool in it when I bought it. I've not sewn much with wool. I don't wear a lot of wool, but I do know that it can shrink. So I thought what would be best to do before cutting into this would be to test it to see how much it would shrink. And if it does shrink significantly, to go ahead and pre-shrink my fabric. And that led me to research on the internet, like everything does, where we find out everything. And I did come across a number of articles that I found really helpful on different ways to pre-shrink wool. I'm going to link the most helpful article that I found below. It's from a website called Core Fabric Store. I think that's right. Yes, I've got my laptop here because I've got a lot of notes and information to share with you guys, so you might see me glancing here. Anyway, they were a wealth of information, and they did say that there are 5 ways you can pre-treat or pre-shrink wool fabric before sewing with it. I'm going to pop little screenshots of their information up here and kind of do a voiceover. And of course, like I mentioned, I'll link that article below. This is their information. I'm not claiming that I came up with all this, but I think it's going to be really helpful. So let's get going. So the first method to pre-shrink the wool would be just to use your dryer. You would wet 2 or 3 towels with hot water and wring out until wet but not dripping. Put it in the dryer with your wool yardage and dry on high for 40 minutes. I'm assuming that when you're putting your wool in there that it's dry, that you haven't pre-wet it. But it's saying that the steam generated by those wet towels will help shrink the wool. They are not suggesting this method for delicate or loosely woven wools because they may not like all that agitation. And in fact, when I was reading several articles, it did say that wool generally does not like to be agitated, that it can start to produce the felting process, and it would have ruined the look of it unless that's the look that you're going for. And the second method is to use indirect steam with an iron. You would cover maybe your bed or another large surface. In my case, I would use my cutting table because it's pretty big. You lay down 2 layers of towels. You lay the wool on the towels in a single layer and hold an iron 1 inch above the wool as you push the steam button. This also works with a handheld steamer. I think we do have a steamer laying around here somewhere. I'm going to have to find it. I bought it thinking it would be great for steaming curtains without having to take them down. I had read that you could, like if you buy curtains in a package, you just run the steamer, you hang them, then you run the handheld steamer the length of the fabric, and it kind of helps smooth out any wrinkles. It turns out that I never ended up using it for that purpose or anything else, but I'm sure it's still around. I'm going to try to find it. And one thing to note with that method, they do point out to not touch the fabric with the iron and to let it lay there for several hours before moving it. So that's kind of a little bit of a time investment, but of course it'll be worth it if you want to pre-shrink your wool and before cutting it out and sewing with it. The third method is to direct steam with an iron. And they say to fill a bowl with water, dip a cotton press cloth in the water and wring it out. Place the press cloth on the fabric and press with your iron on high to release the moisture and steam the wool underneath. Lift the iron each time you move it, no sliding. You repeat this as needed for each section of wool, wetting the cloth frequently. Then you let the fabric sit for a few minutes before moving to the next area. So that could be a viable way. And again, I kind of see this as it's best if you have like a large surface area to lay your whole fabric out on. Method number 4 is to hand wash. So you would gently hand wash with lukewarm water and woolite. To avoid felting, do not agitate the fibers. Gently squeeze the water from the wool. Wrap the yardage in dry towels and wrap up in a roll, squeezing to release the water. And you dry it flat ensuring the grain line is not distorted. Now I have 3 yards of this very chunky, thick sweater knit, and it's 54 inches wide. I can't really see that method working too well just because I feel like it would be hard to roll it up in a towel. It's such like a bulky, unwieldy piece of yardage to work with. So I'm maybe come back to that one. We'll think about it. And method number 5 is to take the yardage to a dry cleaner. They can steam it, pre-shrink it for you. I saw this one come up on several articles that I looked at online. And in doing my due diligence, I did call, I've got some notes here, 4 local dry cleaners. And here are the responses that I got. The first one said that they don't offer that service. The second one said they don't offer this service, and the guy seemed really confused, like he thought I was a little bit crazy. The third dry cleaner said that the owner had already gone. She wasn't sure if they offered that service. I could call them back tomorrow during the morning hours when the owner would be there. And the fourth one said there's no need to even pre-shrink it. Just plan on dry cleaning the garment forevermore. So I really am set on pre-shrinking this fabric just because in an ideal world, I would never wash and dry, never need to wash and dry the finished sweater. But you know, there's going to be times, at least once in a while, that I'll need to do that. Not frequently because it's an over, like an outer, a topper. So it's not going to have usually direct body contact that will prevent it from soiling with body odor and things like that. But I do envision that there will be a time when it'll need to be washed and it could accidentally get thrown into the dryer. Just say it. So I'm kind of dead set on pre-shrinking this fabric. And so what I have done is to cut 4 samples. So because the dry cleaning method was out, that leaves me with 4 methods to try. And so my samples are 4 inches by 4.5 inches. I figured out that I pretty much have enough fabric that I could afford to lose this even if the fabric shrinks. I'm doing the shorter, like cropped length sweater, so I should have theoretically plenty of yardage. So what I'd like to share with you guys in this video, we'll do this process together, is to test out all those other ways, just on my little samples here. Now, if it turns out that like the hand washing method and rolling it up in the towels is the best way, I'm not sure that I'm going to commit to doing that with this big yardage. So maybe I shouldn't even put that into the little test sample process. But I do want to see. I want to satisfy my curiosity. So I am going to do those first 4 methods. And just to recap again, I'm going to read those again. We've got use your dryer. So you put the dry fabric in your dryer with a couple of damp towels. And you know what? That makes me think the dryer that we bought a few years ago has a steam feature on it. I think that, and it kind of just little bursts of moisture. I think I'm going to try that rather than putting wet towels in there. Okay, so the first method, use your dryer. The second method, indirect steam with an iron. The third method, direct steam with an iron. And the fourth method, hand wash. So if you guys are ready, let's start this little experiment. I brought you over here to my table, and rather than put towels underneath, since I'm just working with a small sample, I'm going to just use my pressing mat here. I've made sure that my iron has plenty of water. Actually, I'm doing that right now, and I am using the wool setting. It did not say anything about that in the article about using high heat, low heat, at least that I recall. So I'm just going to use the wool setting. In case you're wondering, this is just water. It used to be Mary Ellen's Best Press. I ran out of that a long time ago, so I just use water now. And then also, too, I'm going to have to remember which sample is which. So I think after I do this one, I'm going to maybe pin a piece of paper that has a note on it saying which method I use for this. So my iron's still warming up. While that's warming up, I'm going to go get the paper and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back and my iron is ready, and I've just labeled this indirect steam. So I don't need a press cloth or anything. I'm not going to touch the iron to the fabric. 1 inch above while using steam. And this is the one that said to let the fabric sit for a few hours before moving it. So there's that. I'm not the world's best presser at all. So I'm trying to hold this close without touching. It's hard to tell if it's doing anything. Oh yeah, and it might be worth noting, show you on this one, because this fabric frays pretty strongly like any sweater knit would. I did do a loose zigzag around all of the edges, especially the one that's going to go in the dryer. So hopefully that won't impact my little study here. I'm not sure if this is doing much. I'd love to have one of those gravity-fed irons. But that's an investment for sure. Well, I'm not sure if this is doing much, but I'll leave it alone. I'm just going to tuck this paper in right there so I don't forget. And then let's look at the direct steam method. I'll be right back. Okay, with the direct steam method, you get a press cloth. This is just a piece of cotton muslin. You get it damp in a bowl of water, it said, but I just ran it under the faucet, wrung it out, and you lay it on your fabric. This one, it did say to use high heat on your iron, so I'm going to bump that up to high heat, give it a couple of minutes for it to come to temperature. And while that's coming to temperature, I'm going to make the label for this one. So this one is just direct steam. And it did say that you're supposed to re-wet your press cloth as you go, which you would need to do if you have like your whole yardage that you're trying to do. I probably shouldn't need to do that for this little square here. So we're up to temperature now. And it said, do not slide. You lift the iron up every time. I'm not sure how long to kind of put it on there to get the desired result. Take the press cloth up. I feel like this is not doing anything at all. All right. I'm going to go ahead and slide the label under this one. So the next method, this was actually number 1 on the list that I shared with you, is to use your dryer. So you know what I think I'm going to do is to go ahead and just get this sample wet, gently squeeze out the water, throw it in the dryer, and maybe just dry it on medium heat. Don't use the steam function on the dryer, just dry it outright and see what happens. Let's go. I'm going to take you through the house with me here, down to the laundry room. If it's a wreck, don't judge me. There's our tree. We're still got to get the ornaments up on it, but it's so pretty. Okay, we're heading to the laundry room. And lately our laundry room has just become like a catch-all for everything, especially while we're doing this tiling project. So let's go in here, and I bet I have stuff in the dryer. Oh yeah, I have a blanket that I washed recently. I'm gonna pull that out. And a jacket. Oh, there's Farley. Say hi, Farley. All right, I'll get that out of there. And I have yet to wet my wool sample. So I'm going to do that, and I will meet you back here in the laundry room. All right, I've got my fabric swatch. It's pretty saturated, and then I squeezed it to wring out the water. I'm just going to throw it in and put it on medium heat. Very dry. Just kick it off. And I'll take you back up to sewing room. And that is because I left my fourth sample up there. That one is the one that's just hand wash and roll it up in a towel to get a lot of the water out. And I think it said lay flat to dry. So this is it. I think what I may end up doing is just get it wet, saturated, squeeze it gently to get the water out, and just let it air dry. So I can do that up here. We have the sink in our bathroom. I won't need to run all the way down again. All right, let us back to the sewing room with our wet sample. I hope I'm not making you guys dizzy. Sorry if I am. I'm just going to lay it here on the ironing mat and just let it dry. I'm going to stick a label next to it. Okay, this one I'm just calling hand wash, air dry. So all we're waiting on now is for all these pieces of wool to dry. Then I'm going to remeasure them and we'll take a look at the results. I'm kind of hoping, well, I'm not sure. I'm kind of hoping that there is a little bit of shrinkage in at least one of the samples. That way I'll know that it does need to be pre-treated, and then I will therefore pre-treat it. If it doesn't shrink in any of the samples, I'm not sure what that tells me. It might tell me that this fabric won't pre-shrink. Maybe the manufacturer did that. Or it could tell me that none of my methods were effective and I still do have to worry about pre-shrinking. So I did look on Mood. I got this from Mood Fabrics in case I forgot to say that. I looked at the listing for this fabric, and it did say that sometimes that these wools are, what did it call, sponged, like pre-shrunk, but dry cleaning is always the best way to launder wool fabrics. And always, always, always test a swatch. And that's what I'm going to suggest to you guys, no matter what these results show to us today. When you're working with your own fabric and your own clothing, I would just highly recommend you test first, because what the methods that I'm using on this particular fabric may not work on different types of wool. If you think about, like, this chunky sweater knit is very different from maybe a fine knit, like tightly woven wool that you would use for a pair of pants. I mean, two totally different fabrics. The only thing that they have in common is that part of the content, or maybe all of the content, is wool, but the weaving process or knitting or whatever could be vastly different. And I guess the fibers too. I'm not an expert. I'm always learning as I go. The bottom line is to say test, test, test. The sample that I put in the dryer is dry now. It's this one. It might be slightly damp, but I think dry enough. I could already see that it was smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and measure all these and we'll see where we stand. So the first, the indirect steam, it said don't move it for a few hours, but with a piece this small, I don't feel like I'm going to stretch it out of shape by just gently lifting it. And it's barely damp. So what I started at, all these were 4 inches wide by 4.5 inches long. So this one with indirect steam is still 4 inches wide by 4.25 inches long, depending on where it's measured, you know, the edges are not, it's not perfectly straight like cutting out a piece of quilting cotton or something. So this could have shrunk a little bit. The direct steam, this one was the one with the damp pressing cloth and the iron sitting directly on, lifting, putting back down. 4 inches wide. And this one also, for the most part, is down to 4.25. So far, it's looking like it's shrinking, you know, lengthwise. The hand wash and air dry is still kind of damp. I can measure it and we'll see what we've got. And it is 3 3/4 inches wide, so it lost some width. And it's looking like it looks like it kind of got distorted a little bit. It's not like as much of a square. And I don't know if that was because of the wetting and the wringing out that could have distorted it. But at the narrowest part, it's 4 inches and 4.5 at the longer end where it's kind of gotten skewed like not a perfect square. Hope that made sense. The one that was hand wash, where I wetted it, saturated, squeezed the water out, put it in the dryer. I started it on medium heat and it was taking too long because I'm just really dying to know the results of this experiment. So halfway through, I did bump it up to high heat. And I thought, well, it couldn't hurt. So let's measure this one. I could already see that this one is smaller. And maybe that's not a surprise given that it was in the dryer with all that heat all around it and being jostled around in the heat. So it is 3.5 to 3 3/4 inches wide. So it lost at least a 1/4 inch width. And lengthwise, it's running 4.25. They're about 4.25. You know, give or take. It's a little bit distorted on the ends here, and that could be because of the agitation of my hands, like squishing it around. We definitely, I feel like that this one, I'm going to kind of set them, and it's not a lot of, and this is still a little damp, the one that came from the dryer. If I were to keep this on at high heat, it could possibly shrink even more. I just wanted to get a feel. I think that, yeah, right here at this length, it's only 4 inches. So this potentially lost up to a 1/2 inch of length. To me, that's pretty significant, especially over the whole length of a piece of yardage, that we could be talking about some serious shrinkage here. Hang on, I'm going to come back and face you guys on the camera and we'll kind of do like a conclusion of this. So we've finished our little experiment, and I think that the takeaways here are that this fabric will in fact shrink, and that I do need to pre-shrink it ahead of time just in case it ever finds itself in the dryer, or if it just shrinks with air drying even just a little bit, it's already going to be made into a sweater that's kind of cropped, and I'm very sensitive about cropped length tops. And if I make this to a certain length and then it shrinks a little bit, I might not be really satisfied with that. So I'm going to go under the presumption that I do need to pre-shrink this sweater knit. And out of all the 4 ways that I tried, I feel like that there's no way I'm about to pre-shrink this with an iron going spot by spot by spot. And that may not even be the best way. It did seem to shrink those little samples a little bit, the ones that got the iron, but by and large, the piece that went into the dryer had the most shrinkage. Let me back up though, I guess in case I didn't say it or if I said it wrong, I do not intend to wash this sweater in the washer just because from everything I've read, it's the washer agitation that can cause the fabric to felt a little bit. So I do not intend to wash the sweater in the washing machine. Any washing will be done by hand, like soaking, but I could conceivably see a time when it might make its way into the dryer, either by accident or like someone else doing the laundry or what have you. So that is my whole premise of pre-washing, pre-shrinking the fabric. I'm not much one to go to the dry cleaners just because I'm too cheap for one and it's inconvenient. So I just prefer to do all my own laundry. So what I'm thinking that, and when I wash and dry this garment after making it up, I'm pretty sure I'll just hand wash and lay flat to dry. But for pre-shrinking purposes, I think I'm going to let it soak in like some warm water in the bathtub. It's so bulky, this whole yardage. And then drain the bathtub. Try to squeeze out gently all the water that I can, as much as I can. And even if I need to let it sit in the bathtub for a few hours, periodically squeezing it, the fabric, and then I'm going to stick it in the dryer, because putting like the sample that I got completely saturated wet and then put in the dryer, the fabric looks great. It did shrink, of course, but it looks fine. It didn't diminish in its appearance or quality at all. I'm going to look at it again just to make sure. But I think that, so then after soaking the yardage in the tub, letting it drain dry or drain damp, I'm going to stick it in the dryer on maybe even high heat and just shrink the heck out of it and then make the garment. I will keep you guys posted every step of the way, of course. And thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you found this interesting. Let me know if you guys, are you guys pre-washers? Do you always pre-shrink your fabrics first just in case? And what do you do regarding delicate fabrics? And it just occurred to me that Whitney over at Tomcat Stitchery might have a video on this. She, to me, is like the font of all sewing knowledge. So I'm also going to take a look at her channel. But given that the dryer didn't seem to hurt the fabric, I think that's how I'm going to pre-shrink it. I'll keep you posted. Again, thanks so much for hanging out with me today, and I hope you'll tune back in next time when maybe I will have some progress on this sweater to share with you guys. That's about it for today, and I'll talk to you then. Bye.